amendments?
No.
Okay. Can I bring Mark in? Mark has a point to make about the technology.
Yeah, just to let members know, and in case anybody's attempting to watch this online, we appear to be having a bit of an issue with the live webcast. I understand that what people are seeing remotely is it's interrupting. It's kind of going off and on. We'll check what the recording looks like at the end, the webcast recording at the end of the meeting. We are, however, also doing a Teams recording, and from what we could see, the Teams recording seems to be perfectly fine. So we will post that later in the day once the meeting's concluded. Thanks.
Okay, Councillor Shaw, do you want to say anything further or? No?
Not at the moment, no.
Okay, that's fine. We have a question from Councillor Gillian Graham.
Thank you very much, Provost, and thank you very much for letting me come in here. It's an observation. Item 3 on page 11, point 4.4. I have to say my heart dropped when I read this. The Cabinet Secretary for Education and Skills has indicated that she's concerned about teacher numbers. And she's decided that funding to councils will now be via specific resource grants. However, she hasn't advised what the conditions will be, and we don't know if these will be acceptable to the council. It just feels like another example of the Scottish Government announcing last-minute policies that were mentioned earlier, made on the hoof. Giving an authority a number for teachers is beyond unhelpful. For example, will councils have money withdrawn if they don't meet the threshold? The Scottish Government is fixated on teacher numbers, and we all know it's not just teachers who make the difference. We wouldn't manage without our learning assistants and our pupil and our family support staff. I think the Scottish Government needs to respect local councils' autonomy in this. If Renfrewshire Council was free to spend money, education money, to have the right staff for our context, that'd be much better. Having to meet teacher numbers means savings maybe affect other crucial areas. Teachers and education staff, I have to say, are sick of the constant change. And I think it's essential that the conditions around these grants are issued as soon as possible, that the Renfrewshire Council is respected, and that skills and experience of education staff are not bound by bureaucratic dictates from on high. Thank you very much, Provost.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Ian Nicholson.
Thanks, Provost. It's just a few observations on the budget process. I mean, I'd like to thank the officers as well for their work this year. Again, it's been a difficult exercise, and reflected by Councillor Ian McMillan as well with regards to timescales and how they're recently over the years just becoming quite disconnected at times, reliance on decisions made by both the Scottish Government, who obviously are reliant on Westminster as well. And I said, this administration has always prioritised and our important frontline services, and the value we place on employees can't be overestimated, and the workforce in delivering those services. Decisions are difficult, however, working collectively, we aim to ensure Renfrewshire Council remains a financially sound and stable council in order to deliver on expectations of residents and the most vulnerable in our communities. Now, I've always expressed this before a number of years in the meeting with the trade unions on Monday. Again, we emphasize, and Councillor Shaw mentioned the fact that no compulsory redundancies. We emphasise that every year because I understand there is a concern amongst local government employees, and particularly when you see bankrupt councils in England. You know, there's 6 so far down there, and maybe that's a reflection on how Scotland does things differently. There's none in Scotland to this day. Now, I can never say it will never happen, but in Scotland it doesn't appear to be having the same impact about Westminster austerity it's having on the local government budgets, and that gets reflected through the block grant into the one that the Scottish Government has to deploy. Now, we can all sit here and criticise and say we should get this, and we rightfully argue the case for local government, but again, it comes down to choices. I mean, elected members in this chamber as well should reflect on the choices. If you're saying local government gets more, we argue for more, COSLA always argues for more, and I respect the fact the Scottish Government has to make choices, but we don't have to agree with them. But they have to make choices with regards to the health services, the boards, and a range of other important services that are delivered across the whole of Scotland. And I'm not defending the Scottish Government. I'm arguing the point about the choices we all have to make with regard to that. And with regard to the Labour budget motion, I fully respect and understand the content of the budget. It's their priorities reflecting it. But what I don't understand is why it was presented in such a way as they spent most of their time shadow boxing the SNP government, rather than focusing on the impact it will have on the people of Renfrewshire. And some of the comments that came through I took notes of. with regards, particularly the roads, I accept that fact that you want to prioritise roads. This administration, the previous one, prioritised it for over 6 years. The last year of our 45 million investment comes this year. And that's why we're committing another 100 million to that, to try and maintain that stable state. But the point about roads is a never ending circle, as what has been expressed before. We'll have repaired the road 5 years ago, and 4 or 5 years later, it'll need repairs, you know, regardless of how you do it. That's the way the nature of the roads network is. And I mean, I'm picking up some of the points that was mentioned in the Labour budget with regards to like the bus feasibility study. We've already committed resources to that, and the report will come regarding that issue to the next leadership board, I understand, with regards to that particular area. And also the fact there was no mention in the Labour budget about Thorn Primary School. Now we know for a fact that there was concern in the Johnston area about the refurbished replacement of that school. We heard that voice and we've put it into our budget to fully fund it. And I'm slightly concerned that the Labour group felt Johnston High School was important to them, without mentioning Greif, Trinity, Renfrewshire and Glenaffer. All those high schools are important to the communities they serve. And I'm not a fan of picking out one high school and saying that either gets priority. All schools has to be assessed equally through our Learning State Improvement Programme. That's the way we're approaching that issue in this administration. We have to be seen to be fair, we have to be seen to be equal, and we have to consider all schools on their own merits. Just pulling out a school and saying, we want that one to be special treatment, I don't think that's fair in other school communities that you've not mentioned. The other issue is as well, obviously, is about the council tax freeze. Now, I need to point this out because the Labour group, obviously, the last Labour administration froze council tax, and that's cost us to this point about 15 to 20 million pound lost income. Now, for Councillor Anne Dillon to say, you know, lost income to the council about council tax fees, you can't have it both ways. You can't make decisions of the council, then suddenly blame the Scottish Government because of the financial position this council finds us in. All the decisions we make as a council will have implications. They will have reverberations as well. They will come back and get you at some point. But by and large, I agree with the comments that everybody in this room wants to do the best for Renfrewshire. We want to see the best for, but we need to make decisions. We need to make bold decisions as well. And we accept a council tax freeze on the basis that it was fully funded. On the basis that would provide some relief for our residents this year round. On the basis it's fully funded, and that was not a lost income. So I don't understand what Councillor Anne Dillon saying it lost income, because it's not lost. And they also had the option to not have a council tax freeze. They could have actually put a council tax freeze in. So trying to have your cake and eat it on that front. As I say, with regards to one of the other comments which I took about bus deregulation in 1986, and I've reminded colleagues in this chamber before, the Labour government was in power at local government, Westminster and in Scottish government for 13 years. They had all levers of power at their disposal, and they never took action about bus deregulation, never done it. And yet here we have this chant about re-regulating buses again. And when Labour get back into government in Westminster, they still won't do it. Put money on it. And the same with the Scottish Government as well, if they ever get back into power. And also, it was the same with the right to buy for social housing. They never took action, never lifted a finger to stop the right to buy. It was SNP government that did that. So all these warm words that come out, we try to reinvent history. And fortunately for a lot of us in this chamber, some of us got long memories on these issues. So you need to remember that when you come to the chamber and start to say it's the Scottish Government's fault for not doing X, Y and Z. When in fact, there was a lot of opportunity over the years to do that via other political parties, including your own, and it never happened. So a bit of reflection on that front would be welcome. Finally, on Councillor Graham's point about teacher numbers, I agree with you on that front, and so does COSLA, because we don't appreciate sometimes the heavy-handed missives that get handed down to us in letter form by ministers on various aspects of local government governance. We don't appreciate that. And because we're in the SNP doesn't mean to say we stay silent on it. We do say that, and we say it at COSLA as well. We don't appreciate, we try and defend the democracy the local government has and its freedom to have to try and deliver for the best of its local communities. So I'm agreeing with you on that point about sometimes the diktats, I would call them, come down, and not just from, it happens in all levels of government, regardless of political party at times. And it happened before when there was a Labour Liberal executive handing out ring fencing decisions left, right and centre everywhere. You know, I remember the times and, you know, you see the papers and Wendy Alexander standing by a cheque, totally bypassing local government to directly fund organisations at a local level. It should have actually involved the local government, but it didn't. So all governments are guilty of that, and the SNP at times is guilty of that as well. So as I say, I'm only here in a point to sort of reflect on our budget today, which is, I think, is a very positive budget, given the circumstances that we're in. It's a very forward-looking budget, and it's the content of this to not only to provide resources for what we believe are priorities for local communities, but also to reinvest back into things that we've already invested in roads. You know, for example, the £1 million borrowed for roads by Labour will in fact cost us £2.1 million once you've paid back all the interest on it. That tarmac is well gone since you've paid that back over 30 years. We try to invest into roads knowing it doesn't have the same life expectancy as a school or a building. We're conscious of that fact, so we try and avoid as much as possible borrowing for things like tarmac, which does not have a long life expectancy, as you would expect for borrowing for a school or for another provision. As I say, the point I made about Thorn Primary School is one where it's already in percent for school estate management plan, and we're delivering on it. And we're also delivering on the Paisley Grammar, which are the two priority schools in our SEMP. That's how we operate as an administration. We don't try and divide between schools. We try and support them all. So I say I commend our budget, as Councillor Shaw did earlier on. I think it's a good budget this year, and I think I wish we could do more. We could always do more with more resources, but we are with it. And I think the residents will appreciate a freeze this year to try and help them with their household budgets. Provost, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Andy Doig.
Thanks, Provost. I'd like first of all to ask Councillor Shaw a question in relation to the papers. I'd like to talk about the specific benefits in the administration's budget for Ward 9. I'd like to make some general comments about the content of the administration budget and also make some comments, positive comments about the opposition budget. Can I ask Councillor Shaw, item 3, page 18, clause 9.2 under the council tax refers to an additional charge on second homes. Now, there are probably at least 5 or 6 derelict or abandoned second homes that are in this position in my ward, and I'm quite sure there'll be others right across this county. It's a social blight on the community for neighbours who are both owner-occupiers and council tenants. I take the point the board paper has made, there's additional charge has been added. I'd like to know, Provost, can we address this problem further by increasing this additional charge? That would also, of course, increase the council's, have the byproduct of increasing the council's coffers, but we need to tackle this problem of derelict second homes. It really is an issue in some of the villages and in some of the town centres. That's the first point. In relation to Ward 9, I'd like to welcome the investment by the administration in village and community halls. This will mean money to upgrade the acoustics in the McKillop Institute in Lochwinnoch and to complete the upgrade of the kitchens at Howwood Village Hall, which I have asked the administration to do. I do welcome the further investment by the SNP in education. I think both Councillors Macmillan and Councillor Nicolson were right. There was some level of concern, I think, in Johnson as a community about Thorn Primary, so I very much welcome that. I like the fact that Labour have made a commitment to Johnson High, but also take the point that the Councillor Nicolson made. There's a whole range of schools probably that need investment. What I would say is that I would hope that Johnson High might be closer to the top of that list, because I think that it does need a lot of significant work. So I take the point that Councillor Nicolson has made, Provost, that we need to look at the range of schools that need improvement. I think Johnson High is in a state of particular need. I welcome the further investment in roads. This will allow the installation of new safety features at the notorious B76 Bowfield Road junction at the Country Club, which I've asked for, and allow officers to examine the feasibility of bringing Parkview Lane into Kilbarkin back into use as a parking area. And this will go a long way to try to increase parking in the area in light of the council's proposals, anti-speeding measures in the village. In terms of general points, other general points in the budget, as somebody who's been in the planning board for 12 years, I very much welcome this idea of funding for a planning enforcement officer. It's long overdue, Provost. I think there's been various cases that have came before the planning board that where there's been a clear breach, and there's one comes to mind in particular in the Lochwinnock area, and it's been difficult for officers to get to grips with it. So I welcome that. The increased cultural funding, I think, will be welcomed. The Lochwinnock Arts Festival and the Wellbeing Festival. Lochwinnock Arts Festival is one of the biggest community festivals in the west of Scotland, and I think that will be very much welcomed. I've always been a big supporter of the Retail Improvement Scheme, because local businesses are really at the heart of our communities. It's local businesses that make places like Johnson, Kilbark and Lochwinnock, Howwood. That's what makes our communities distinctive. It's the local businesses, the independent traders, and anything we can give them to support them at this time, I think, is extremely welcome. As I said, I do welcome. I don't think there's much to choose. There's a big focus in both the Labour and SNP budgets and social justice, which I welcome. And I think, as I said, I do very much welcome the point made in the Labour budget about the need for a Johnson High School. And I do hope when budgets allow, Provost, this can be proceeded as part of an overall programme of schools upgrade. I do think, to conclude, I do think Councillor McMillan has a point, and I think there was a meeting of minds there at the end. Prior to 2014, I can't remember the SNP government being as interventionist in local government as it was. And because I've known the First Minister since he was a young activist, I'd hoped that he would bring a different style and a different change of approach. I do really think, in general, Holyrood has to do better in terms of giving local councils the time to look at their budgets and to set a proper budget. We have to have the time to plan, whether it's the Labour group or yourselves, and I think that's important. So I think, to conclude, Holyrood has to do better, I think, and interfere less. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Doig. You raised quite a few points here, good points. There's a couple that I'm sure the officers will be glad to talk to you about at some stage after the meeting, maybe not today, but another day, particularly the one about the derelict housing. So you can take that up again with the officers. Councillor Graham Clark.
Thank you, Provost. Like all councillors across Scotland, we have in the Labour group struggled with the shortage of funding which is available to us. But we have tried to prioritise some of our main concerns as we listen to the people of Renfrewshire, and that has been to make sure that children don't go hungry when they're sitting in school, and also to repair the roads. And now, I notice in the budget motion that there's $1 million being added to the 4 million, which is already there in the general capital grant. But I'm also aware that in Renfrewshire, the steady state sum is 7 million, and that only repairs or renews 5% of our roads and 2.5% of our pavements. We are aware that there is a large number of potholes across Renfrewshire at this time, and that they're damaging people's vehicles, they're costing them money when they don't have that money to spend. And so we really, we wanted to address that in our Labour amendment. And I think that it's reasonable at this time to borrow some capital funding in order to make sure that the roads are repaired to somewhat as they should be. It wouldn't completely repair roads because there's not enough money for that, but it would certainly bring them up to the steady state situation. So there are lots of things in the motion from the SNP, and lots of small sums been given to lots of organisations who I'm sure will be very grateful for that. We have tried to put larger sums towards key priorities in order to make a real difference. And I think that our Labour amendment does that, and so I commend that amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor Lisa Marie Hughes.
Thanks, Provost. I wanted to speak just briefly about the continued investment in culture and leisure that's come from the SNP administration in the budget. You'll note £800,000 towards better. £800,000 for synthetic playing surfaces, and I'm saying that because previously it's very much been targeted towards full G pitches, and full G pitches are incredibly important, but so that and some of the funding would go towards that. But we also need to look at how we can do things with our communities. So if they have the kind of slightly less professional grade pitches they want to put in, but want to do something that's a community development, we want to be able to support that as well. I really welcome it, and I'm sure I'll hear from every, should it be successful? I shouldn't. I'm sure I'll hear from every football team in Renfrewshire in the next couple of days, and I'll take it. And also, I'm grateful to my colleagues for supporting putting more funding into cultural funding. It is really important. The Chef Fund has delivered an incredible amount of different opportunities for people across Renfrewshire, free opportunities largely, which I think is really important. And we don't expect that this will be the same as Chef funding. There's been a real discussion with Louisa mainly, with our colleague organisations, around a bit of sustainability around things. They're really struggling with constantly having to apply for grants, and I hope they see that we've heard them and want to take that forward, but also that at a time where people are really cash strapped, us being able to support them to provide really quality experiences for people who might not have them otherwise. We've listened and we're ready to help them do that. That work will be ongoing and it will come to board. And while it's not technically under my remit, it comes under Emma's and education. Libraries work alongside the Dolly Parton Imagination Library, and I have to say, as an intervention into literacy, it is a big sum of money, but for what it does, it is a very small sum of money. The outcomes from that are just incredible. I don't think it's a surprise to anybody in this chamber that I'm quite bookish, and that books and reading changed my life, and the Imagination Library, along with things like our library services and the event we put on, are doing that. Many families cannot afford to be buying a book every month. It is life-changing. So I'm really delighted we put that money in there, and I'm sorry if I stole one of my colleagues' thunders by talking about it, but I just think it's really exciting that we're going to continue doing that work. Renfrewshire is renowned UK-wide for it, so I will stop there.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Hughes. Councillor Airlie Nicolson.
Thank you, Provost. I'll be brief just in terms of it. Looking at both budgets here and what they have considered.
Sorry, could you just put the mic down?
Sorry, I'll do this. Is that better?
That's better.
Okay. Looking at both budgets, I think we've both had a really difficult job in terms of the amount of money that we had available. And I think we have to acknowledge that to start off with. What we have tried to do as an administration is consider the needs across the population of Renfrewshire. Whilst there has been a focus in both budgets in terms of social justice, Labour's budget has a narrower focus, I would say, in terms of what it's proposing. We wished to look at our population as assets to the community, with funds being utilised to benefit as wide a group as possible. We looked at the elderly in the community in terms of what we could offer for them through our ROAR programme. We looked at the young people and development of the youth-led programme. We supported our care experienced people with some funds there as well. And we supported the early years through the Imagination Library. We've also looked at the health and wellbeing across the population of Renfrewshire with the investment in the outdoor play and our sports areas and investments in community halls. I think our budget tries to utilise the money available to support the community across its widest sense. And it has emphasis where relief is required. We haven't ignored the needs there. But what we've tried to do is make sure that everybody who has a need in the community and an express to do well and be valued has been included in what I think is a very positive budget that's been put forward by the administration. And I also want to wish to thank Alistair and his team for the support he's gave in bringing us together. And just to re-emphasise, people who live in our communities in Renfrewshire are not all people who are needing support. They are people who offer support and can add to our community. So I think they also need to be given opportunities through the funding that we have available to do that. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Airlie Nicolson. Councillor Eddie Devine.
Thanks, Provost. Could I just thank Ian for having a meeting with us earlier in the week. It was very enlightening. But could I just remind them that the SNP came to power umpteen years ago and imposed a council tax freeze for 10 years. They also said that they would get rid of the hated council tax, which hasn't happened yet. Hopefully that comes. I'm genuinely deciding which lesser of the two evils I'm going to vote for. I could just remind you that you've also cut £3 million from the roads department. The final piece is we as a council really need to get a grip of the ASN provision in our schools. It really needs to be addressed, and it needs to be addressed fairly quickly. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Marie McGurk.
Thanks, Provost. I think most of what I'm going to say, actually, Councillor Early Nicolson has actually provided that. But the summer of activities for children is so important. It goes right across Renfrewshire. And our children are well looked after during that period of time. It's a great support for our families, especially families of low income who really appreciate it. And I am very fortunate to be able to go and visit them on a regular basis. I'm delighted to see the money for Roar. I know how important the work that they do in our community, especially for older people, is essential. And I was really pleased to see that money for them here. The Dolly Parton Imagination Library, I know a number of children who benefit from that, children who really struggled to look at books are now reading books with their parents on a regular basis. And the Community and Learning Development Team also support that on a regular basis. Who Cares Scotland? It's so important for us. We said as part of our administration that we would be corporate parents and corporate supports for people who in care, and we are doing that every day in this council, and it's still delightful to see the money continuing. The additional money for the Team Up to Clean Up, well, what can I say about that? It's so well received by our communities right across Renfrewshire. The communities themselves support it, and they're looking for additional areas want to come in as well. So it's lovely to see that. And the enforcement side, a number of members in the chamber have asked for that for so many years. Now you see it here. It's part of the whole structure of the administration. And then planning enforcement officer, I have to say, I'm so pleased to see that. I've obviously wanted that for many years. So I think this budget is a fair budget. It's across all. It speaks for everybody in Renfrewshire, and I'm delighted to support the budget today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McGurk. Councillor Jacqueline Cameron.
Thank you, Provost. Yeah, I also want to commend the budget. I think it's a really positive and creative budget under the circumstances. And as Councillor Nicolson was saying, we've seen councils in England go effectively bankrupt. So we're in a better position. Obviously, we'd like to be in an even better position. But I think with what we've got, we've done a good job. As chair of the Fairer Renfrewshire subcommittee, I also want to say that I'm really pleased with the funding for the Fairer Renfrewshire programme and also the top up for the Scottish Welfare Fund. We know in a cost of living crisis, people really need money in their pockets, and I think it's really important that we do that. When I took on the convenership, I talked to Councillor Clark because I thought it was really important that we had a cross-party support for these kind of issues. And I think despite the fact that we've got some political jibing across the chamber today, at the end of the day, we all want the same things for the people of Renfrewshire, but I will be voting for our motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacqueline. Councillor Jim Patterson.
Many thanks, Provost. Whilst we've all done this, but I think it's important that we all do this. We need to recognise the financial constraints on us as a local authority. As we talk about the bits of the budget we do, I'm pleased to support the budget. It's a budget which includes a number of issues which are my priorities and have become my priorities over the last 8 years as a councillor. I think the increase in Scottish welfare funding, the continuation of the winter school payment, the Who Cares Communities project are particular highlights for me. But as has already been mentioned, I think the continued support of the Dolly Parton Imagination Library is worth mentioning again, because Renfrewshire remains the only local authority area in Scotland to have as extensive a programme as we do, then that all children between the ages of 2 and 5 can sign up to the book gifting scheme, and hopefully we will start to see the impact on the kind of literacy rates in the early years. It's always important to acknowledge that because of the good work that's done by Gail, Julie, Michelle and her team, that all the early learning centres are tuned into this, so they know what books are at home with the children, so they can have structure their reading at nursery around those books, knowing that the book's also at home for the parents to reinforce that learning, and I think that's very important. I also want to welcome the funding to put in place a planning enforcement officer. It's been clear to me since taking the role 2 years ago that the role of planning convener, rather, that enforcement was a source of frustration for not just residents but also colleagues across the chamber. I felt it was important when discussing with the planning department that we got somebody in place, but it wouldn't impact and take away from their time doing other important, vital services within the planning department. So I'm really pleased that we've committed to that for 2 years and see how it goes, and hopefully we'll start to give confidence to residents again that if they do approach us with planning issues, that they will be acted on by our enforcement officer. Councillor Doig referred to a long ongoing case in his ward. I have several on my own, and we talk about them ad nauseum as we have a cup of coffee together in the members' chambers. I think we're well versed in each other's planning issues in the ward, so I'm really pleased to see that. On the Labour amendment, there's lots to be, I think, welcomed in that as well. I think it's, I take Councillor Clark's point. They've went for a kind of a higher funding for less priorities. We've went for smaller funding for more priorities, and that's just the way we've done it. But I actually probably, I don't know, I might be correct if I'm wrong, this is probably the closest the 2 budgets have been in priorities in my time as a councillor, actually. That probably has a lot to do with the fact we've not got much money to spend. And we're kind of hamstrung, we're all going in the same direction. But I think there is things to be welcomed from it. And particularly the community transport element, which is an area I'm extremely passionate about, and working cross-party with the Councillor Janice McDonald. We had a meeting earlier this week, and there is good progress going in there, and I know that the Community Transport Cooperative are going to be applying to our Sustainable Communities Fund to get their own feasibility study. And as Councillor Nicolson referred to earlier, I'm aware that the Public Transport Network Review, if I think of it's called correctly, is going to report to the next leadership board, and obviously that will form part of, I suppose, it'll identify where all the gaps are, and we can start having more serious conversations with the grassroots groups that want to step up and do community transport in Renfrewshire, and where we can support them, and in some cases where we can just get out their way and let them deal with it because they're a better place to do it, and we don't want to become an obstacle to their enthusiasm and their desire to help their own communities. I suppose the last thing I'll touch on, and whether I get into trouble from this from way up and beyond or not, I'm ideologically against any kind of mandated council tax freeze, fully funded or not. I think it's a decision for local government to take. Now, I'm not saying I'm not supporting this council tax freeze today. Whether we would have done that anyway, we will not know. But I think we have to have a reset with the Verity House agreement, and I think that needs to be revisited, because I think it's extremely important that we are held to account for decisions here. Come election time, I want to be able to stand up and say, well, actually, I did agree with the council tax freeze, or I thought we had to increase it this year. I know other councils are doing so. I'm not going to criticise them. I salute them for making their own choices and obviously dealing with the repercussions. But it's just a point of principle for me, regardless of political party that's in charge. I don't appreciate being mandated to by anybody in the terms of the way we have and with regarding this council tax freeze. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Councillor Robert Innes.
Thanks, Provost. I would second what Councillor Patterson said there at the end. But I wanted to highlight the investment in young people in this budget. Obviously, everybody's highlighted the cost of living crisis, and the young people didn't cause the cost of living crisis. So we need to make sure that we're investing in our young people for the future, And I think that this budget does do this. Councillor McGurk highlighted there the 100,000 investment in summer activities, and I think that is so important. It is, especially for low-income families. But the 100k to strengthen engagement with some of our most vulnerable young people there. I'm really pleased to see that. A youth-led programme improve their well-being and Renfrewshire's well-being overall. I'm really excited to see what comes of that. But investing in our winter school payments, to our pitches, to music tuition, all this stuff helps our young people, and the SNP are delivering for young people in Renfrewshire. Thanks, Provost.
Thank you, Councillor Innes. And Councillor Andy Steele.
You caught me scribbling a note, Provost, my apologies. Just a few very brief points. Particularly welcome, as many have mentioned, the funding at point 3.3 to go toward ROAR, to, what does it say, explore the inequalities experienced by older people in Renfrewshire. O'Neill's, yes. Can I just make a quick plea for more traditional funding bodies to step up to the plate in regard to this? I know the problems they've had sourcing funding down the line. The work that is done, prevention is always better than cure, Provost. The work that groups like ROAR do in preventing people needing further attention down the line, more expensive, more invasive, more stressful intervention is colossal. And the more support these groups can get, the earlier they get the support, the better for everyone in our communities, particularly our older people. Can I also welcome the investment in the Retail Investment Fund? Fight for the high street. We all have to do it. It's a struggle at the moment, as we all know, but every penny is welcome. On the schools, I am delighted to see the investment for Johnston High for Thorn Primary. Well chuffed with that. On Johnston High, I agree with Councillor Nicolson about a holistic approach. I am also very two-facedly agree with Councillor Doig about Johnston being at the top of any lists. Make sure we do that. Very bottom one I wanted to mention was the investment in new bins. I get the train in this morning and I walked past a bin in Cosford that's absolutely hanging in bits. It's just awful. It doesn't actually encourage you to put rubbish in it. It's so bad. And I've got a request in for a new year, which I'm pretty sure all ward councillors have done at some point down the line for this particular bin. It's right outside a primary school, so let's have a new bin for that. Thank you.
Okay, I hope somebody gets on to that right away. Who's the bin man? Gordon. You heard it here first. Thank you, Andy. Councillor Ann Dowling.
Thanks, Provost. I'll be very brief just to respond to some of the comments and to kind of wind up our amendment. I think it's clear from both the budgets that have been presented today that there is a lot of commonality. There's very little that we can see in the Labour benches that we wouldn't support in the administration's budget. We all want to support the widest possible number of community groups and individuals in Renfrewshire. But you know, the bottom line is there isn't enough money coming in to fund everything that we want to do or that Renfrewshire people would rightly expect us to do at the moment. And the reason for that is two governments that have put the squeeze on the money that's available to governments and for individual people who live in Renfrewshire. So that economic background is the deciding factor here. We have made the decision that while we would have loved to have added 3 or 4 more pages to our budget with reflecting some of the priorities that the administration has highlighted, that we know that the evidence is now very, very compelling that in-work poverty, not just people on benefits, but in-work poverty is at an all-time high in this country, and it's no different in Renfrewshire. We know from the advice agencies, the CAB, Advice Works, Joseph Rowntree Trust, etc., Trussell, we know that working parents are turning up for food parcels because they cannot afford to cover all of their outgoings and feed their kids. And we know from feedback from teachers as well as parents that it is now a regular occurrence that children turn up at school hungry and go through the day hungry. But we have made the decision that we can't wait any longer for the additional investment that we were promised in 2021 from the SNP administration of Holyrood, which I've no doubt this SNP administration here would fully implement, would grab at the opportunity to roll out a universal free school dinner. But we have taken the decision as a Labour group that this is a key priority. We cannot have young children going through the day with hunger pangs. That is completely unacceptable. So we want to do something about it, and that's why, in order to properly finance that, we had to put in the £2.2 million that we allocated to that, because anything less would not have been enough of a resource to cover that commitment. We also cannot tolerate, and I'm very glad that this has been mentioned several times in the chamber, the ongoing challenges that children with additional support needs face. If we cannot provide an appropriate educational environment for children, that has lifelong impacts, not just in their life chances, but on their family and the wider communities that they live on. It has economic impacts in that they are less skilled, that are less able to develop life skills to participate in the economic growth that we also need in Renfrewshire. So as a whole, everyone is affected by that, not just those children, not just their families and their friends, it's every single person in the community. We've got an ageing community, we need a tax base of workers. If we can't get them through an education, then we've got nearly 40% of all of our schools in Renfrewshire with an ASN needs in the schools. That has a knock-on effect for every age group. So these are just two of the key priorities that we have focused on in our budget amendment. It doesn't mean that we don't support the other very worthwhile causes that have been allocated resources today, but we had to work with the money that we had on the table, and that is where we have prioritised our funding. And the last thing I would say is I would plea to the SNP administration here, if as is probable on the numbers in the room that your budget is the budget that's voted through and accepted today, that you go back to your party in Holyrood and demand action on some of the key priorities that we've all touched on today. We cannot wait until 2026, the next Holyrood election. We need action now, and the Labour benches will fully support you in any efforts that you put in to accelerate funding for some of these priorities. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ann Dowling. John, do you want to sum up?
I don't have much to say, Provost. My colleagues have covered lots of the points I was going to mention. There is just one point though, which I think is quite important. Councillor Doig talked about the Labour Group's commitment on Johnstone High School. There is no commitment on Johnstone High School in their budget. There's a commitment on a report on Johnstone High School. There's no funding attached to this. There's no commitment to build a new Johnstone High School. They're trying to bypass the work underway at the moment in the school, the state management plan, to move Johnstone High School to the top of any kind of future list. But there is no money here. There is no money in this budget for this. So I'm surprised that the councillors that cover, Glenaffer High School, Greif High School, and my colleagues in Ward 1 and 2 that have agreed to this. So there's only one amendment here which is going to build a new school, and that's the SNP one. The SNP budget here is committing the balance of funding that's required for Thorn Primary School, something that has been completely overlooked in the Labour budget. So in voting, anybody that decides to vote for this report on Johnstone High School is voting against Thorn Primary being built, which is really surprising given these Johnstone councillors that were standing outside Thorn Primary standing outside getting their picture for the papers saying the SNP aren't doing this.
Please, Councillor Dowling, no.
The SNP are building a new Thorn Primary, and the Labour Party
Councillor Dowling,
and the Labour
can
Party
you hold on, Councillor?
Yep.
Everyone has been able to speak today uninterrupted, regardless of what they've had to say about the opposition. So can you please remain silent while Councillor Shaw gives us his...
We've heard diatribes all day from Councillor Ann Dowling about the SNP, and we haven't said a word because we're polite. We understand this is an important meeting, but she just can't help herself. Anybody voting for the Labour motion today is voting against a new Thorn Primary. Remember that, because we'll be telling everybody. Remember that, Councillor McMillan? So that's all. Well, I'm not pulling any trick. I'm not pulling any trick. It's quite clear. It's quite clear. It's quite clear. It's quite clear. There's £4 million in funding for Thorn Primary, which you're going to vote against because you're voting for a motion about a report on Johnstone High School, a report with no funding attached. Thank you, Provost. I move an amendment.
What's your point of order, Councillor?
Can I just say, we were told at the last Education Policy Board there would be a report coming to the next Education Policy Board about Thorn Primary. We were content with that. The Labour Group fully supports a new Thorn Primary. Now, you can pick out lines that... Listen, we are supporting our motion. We are supporting our amendment. That doesn't mean to say we disagree with every single thing that's in the SNP.
We'll have a recess if you wish to let you all calm down. But that was not a point of order, I have to tell you. Okay, thank you. We'll go to the vote.
Thank you, Provost. There's a roll call vote. We have a motion by Councillor Shaw, seconded by Councillor Early Nicolson, and an amendment, excuse me, from Councillor Ann Dowling, seconded by Councillor McMillan. Could members confirm whether they are voting for Councillor Shaw's motion or Councillor Ann Dowling's amendment? Councillor Adam.
Motion.
Councillor Early Nicolson.
Motion.
Councillor Ann Dowling.
Amendment.
Councillor Burns.
Motion.
Councillor Jacqueline Cameron.
Motion.
Provost Cameron.
Motion.
Councillor Campbell.
Motion.
Councillor Clark.
Amendment.
Councillor Davidson.
Amendment.
Councillor Devine. Councillor Andy Doig.
Motion.
Councillor Roger Doig.
Motion.
Councillor Gilmer.
Amendment.
Councillor Grady.
Amendment.
Councillor Gillian Graham.
Amendment.
Councillor Neil Graham. Councillor Gray. Councillor Hood.
Abstain.
Councillor Hughes.
Motion.
Councillor Innes.
Motion.
Councillor Leishman.
Amendment.
Councillor McFarlane.
Motion.
Councillor James McLaren.
Amendment.
Councillor Kenny McLaren.
Motion.
Councillor Mags McLaren.
Motion.
Councillor McCulloch.
Amendment.
Councillor McDonald.
Amendment.
Councillor McEwen.
Motion.
Councillor McGonigal. Councillor Maguire. Councillor McGirt.
Motion.
Councillor McMillan.
Amendment.
Councillor McNaughton.
Motion.
Councillor Mullen. Councillor Milet.
Motion.
Councillor Nicolson.
Motion.
Councillor Patterson.
Motion.
Councillor Rodden.
Motion.
Councillor Shaw.
Motion.
Councillor Smith.
Amendment.
Councillor Steele.
Motion.
Councillor Hannigan has voted for the motion. I have 23 for the motion, 17 for the amendment and 2 abstentions.
Okay, thank you, councillors. I know that emotions are running high today. And the entire year for us as a council, this is always the most difficult meeting that we ever have. We all want to do the best that we can. And when I was elected 25 years ago, the question was, how are we going to spend the money? Not what are we going to cut? And I think even during the financial crash of around about 2008, 2009, there was plenty of what some might describe as low-hanging fruit. There were plenty of cuts that we could make without interfering with any services or staff and things like that. So it's been really, really difficult. And I don't want you all to forget that. It's been an unprecedented 15 years from that financial crash. We had a global pandemic, wars in Europe. All of that all creates, helped to create a cost of living crisis. And it's all affected public finances right across the world and cost pressures. And that's all impacted in our communities. And it's tough decisions that have to be made by councillors and members of staff. So it's not lost on me that it's an extremely difficult day for everybody. It really is. And hopefully we can only just hope that we get it right. So thank you for your patience, especially members of the public. I know there's quite a few here from a group who are in to hear a particular motion. So it's going to be my intention to hear that motion first when we get to the motions. And I'll let you get away. We'll move on now, though, to the non-housing. Item 4 on the agenda is the non-housing capital investment programme, Prudential Framework and Treasury Management Strategy and Capital Strategy 2004 to 25, 2008 to 29. Councillor Shaw. Okay. Who's your seconder? Councillor Early Nicolson. Officially second. Okay. Do we have any amendments? No amendments. Councillor Jill Graham.
Thank you very much, Provost. On page 47.5.1, this paragraph talks about maintaining the council's key assets. And while we can all write lists of community facilities which need investment, and I support that, and I understand there's a review taking place, can we also be assured that the multi-million-pound capital investments at Paisley Museum and Paisley Town Hall have been allocated sufficient maintenance budgets to maximise the council's investment in the medium and long term? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Nicolson.
Thanks, Provost. I just want to come in and say it's one of those items that sometimes doesn't attract a lot of attention to it and just passes on. But I think it's worth pointing out on page 45, this council is involved in a vast array of infrastructure programmes of a scale which is actually quite impressive. Sometimes we're too close to recognise we're busy doing the work. But when you step back and look at it on the list on page 45, and I think the office as well, and I know this sounds if, but I always give them my gratitude for the tightening resources we have with regards to the employees we have to deliver all these assets is quite difficult at times. But when you look down the programme of works and you look at the delivery of the Ahmed site, we've now moved on to the Ahmed South site. We're building bridges. We're looking at building a bridge over the Cart to help with employability in the Shortwoods area into the airport zone. We're Paisley Theatre investment in the Paisley Museum. The Town Hall's just about to come on. Paisley Town Hall's delivered as well. We just don't stop. You know, we're an ambitious council, and I think that reflects the fact that all the elected members of the chamber appreciate the amount of work it goes on with regards to our capital plan estate. Sometimes they take a good few years to deliver, but I often feel at times that budgets, this is the one item that everybody just sort of like moves on from, but it's just to draw attention to it, the amount of work that does go on, and I don't want people to get the impression that the council's completely in a sort of downward spiral with everything. I know we've had a cut to our capital funding this year, a cut as well, and that was a cut was applied across the whole of UK, and I mean just Scotland. So again, I just wanted to point out the fact that our investment in a lot of key areas and infrastructure is still ongoing. It's still been managed through COVID. It was managed through the cost of living crisis. It was managed through the Ukraine war. Inflation was up at 14% and the rest of it. And I know we've had to do adjustments here and everywhere. But again, I'll just reiterate my thanks to all the staff who helped to keep all these projects on track to date. As I say, so it's quite an impressive list. And I just want to express my thanks on record for that, Provost. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Graham Clark.
Thank you, Provost. As a past member of the Council's Vision Board under our Labour administration, I'm delighted to see some of these ideas of the development of the museum, the Arts Centre and the Town Hall, which were first muted at that time. I have a couple of points to make, Provost. I note page 43, 3.1, that support for BA systems towards the extension of the Parkmains High School is assumed to be 15 million. As this affects the non-housing capital expenditure, can you tell me, hopefully, when and how this 15 million will be ascertained? So at the moment, it's an assumed amount, but obviously we want to move ahead with these things. I'm glad that the council is moving quickly to answer some of the concerns of parents in Dargavel, but it would be good just to get clarity there. And then page 46, 4.3, Abbey Close was planned as an enlarged public event space for the Paisley Town Centre. That was for all the people of Renfrewshire. It was an enhancement to the considerable investment in the Town Hall. It's unfortunate that the cost overruns due to the complexity and delays to Paisley Museum and Paisley Arts Centre, all being that that's understandable, that these bills will deprive the town of the safe space for larger gatherings in the meantime. I'm therefore delighted that the scheme is paused rather than lost to us, and I just want to say that I hope that we can go ahead with that at some future date. I know we've got the constraints of funding just now, but I do think it's an important space for the people of Renfrewshire. And if you've been at these events, Provost, in terms of safety, it would be good to have a bigger space so that people aren't pushed into the narrow corridors which there are there just now. That's all I want to say. Thank you.
Yeah, I can confirm it's on pause. And it'll be looked at again when finances are better, whenever that may be. But there are, I'm sure you understand there are bigger priorities at this moment. Yeah. Councillor Ian McMillan.
Thank you very much, Provost. Appendix 2, you've got the money in there for the new Thorn Primary School. I would just like to welcome that. As you know, on the previous item, we voted against your motion as a whole. You can't just pick and choose things. Now, I'm not going to make anything out of the fact that the SNP voted against 2.2 million for free school dinners. I'm not going to mention that, right? But I'm afraid this tactic has been used before when the Labour group voted against something and it contained really good things that we really supported. And can I just remind you, when that tactic was used before, the next election, the Labour Party returned a majority of councillors. Okay, so to me, it's a completely waste of time tactic. People in Johnson know that we support the Thorn Primary School. The teachers, the staff and the kids know that we support Thorn Primary School. So I just want to reiterate that you can, Councillor Shaw, I know you're not in the council very often. I know you make an annual visit to the council. I know that, but if you could just keep your comments to yourself, thanks.
Ian, you've been here a long time, the same as me. I don't think I can ever remember a year without that tactic being at play. Ever, no matter who was sitting in this chair. Okay, so Councillor Janice McDonald. Janice.
I just really have a point of clarification, Provost. On page 43, item 2D, it delegates authority to relevant heads of service in consultation with the Director of Finances to adjust where appropriate resources. I'm just wondering if this is a new delegation of authority or if it's within the current framework of delegations. And is there a risk when there's a number of delegations across such a body of work? It's not like just one department here. So there could in theory be quite a lot of monies moved away from political priorities or whatever, in my mind at least. So I just wondered if I could have a point of clarification around that, if there's some framework that we need to consider about limitations.
Okay, if you don't mind, I'll let Mark just check that just now and get back to you. I think there was a request made, a question was made that Alan was going to answer. Am I right, Alan? Alistair?
Thanks, Councillor McDonald. Just to your point there, this delegation is a standard delegation that's included in every capital plan, certainly for the past number of years that I've been involved with the council, and it just allows flexibility for officers to move usually small amounts of resource without having to come back to full council for approval. Where that happens, any movements of capital resource between projects is always reflected in the following report to the relevant policy board, so members have full visibility of any use of that flexibility by officers. So hopefully that provides some assurance.
Okay, I understand. I'll pick it up in other quarters and just in terms of the range of drift that could happen.
Okay, Janice, are you okay with that response and take it up later?
I'll take it away with my audit scrutiny risk board hat on and speak to Councillor Doyle.
Okay, thanks, Janice. Councillor Mary McGurk.
Thanks, Provost. What we'd just like to say is, yeah, it is true that this non-housing capital investment programme is sometimes overlooked. We kind of just accept it and move on. But it's fundamental to make sure that our communities are fully aware that we have this ongoing maintenance work for all our buildings and all our structures in Renfrewshire. And there's some really good stuff here, some new stuff, continued stuff like the cycling, walking, safer routes programme is huge and people are asking for that all the time. The renewal of the play parks, constantly people are asking and writing to me what we're going to do about that. And I'm delighted to see that the Lagoon Internal Play Centre is going to be improved, because that's definitely a big one that I hear a number of times from people in the community. So we shouldn't overlook this one. This is a huge amount of investment, and I think we should be making sure our communities are well informed on that. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you, Councillor McGurk. Okay. Give me a wee second. Councillor Jim Patterson.
Thanks, Provost. I think Councillor Nicholson's right. We do usually, I don't know if it's because we're so exerted from the revenue account that we sometimes skip past this report a lot quicker when we come to it. But just one area I wanted to highlight, and I think it's some of the best money we've ever spent in this council, and we continue to spend, is in the renewal and refurbishment of existing play parks. I don't think I've ever done anything so universally popular in my time as a councillor. Certainly the ones in my ward, Tinto Square has been done up, and the one in Victory Gardens and Gala Hill at the top of Neverhill Road are due to be done in the current wave. I mean, it's money well spent. If for no other reason, it gives certain councillors great photo ops, although I'm not one of them. I can avoid the camera for all sorts of obvious reasons, but I think it provides, it's money well spent because as we're hearing about a cost of living crisis, it's important that children have areas which are free to access, universal. And you go into a park, you're on, that's it. It's a, I suppose, it's a leveler, isn't it? Because all weddings, when I take my weddings to the park, to the one nearest is, or we go to Knockhill or one of the Robertson Park, and you just let them loose, it's a real leveler because you just see the kids all, they don't care, they just get on with it. And it's quite endearing to see because you sit back and let them go on with it. It's not costing you anything, and you can have, and I think that's really important, even more so with COVID and how much more reliant we became in outdoor place. I just think that's always one worth highlighting. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. On that same issue, I'm sure Councillor Nicolson wouldn't be surprised to hear me saying I've been trying to get one in Upper Glenburn for quite some time, so I expect to see it next year. Thank you. Whoever's listening. Okay, can we just agree that, oh, I'm sorry, there's an answer to a question from Councillor Clark. Mark, I'm getting myself totally confused now.
Thanks, Provost. Councillor Clark, you asked the question in respect of the contribution from BE Systems and when we would have confirmation of that. That's likely to take quite some time. The process in respect of the assessment of the contributions set out in the Section 75 agreement, that's currently been worked through. But the biggest contributing factor to the figure to be paid by BE will be the actual cost of the extension itself. And at this stage, obviously, that's not known. So that will take quite some time to work its way through.
Thank you, Mark. Okay. So we agree the item 4, the non-housing capital investment programme. Thank you. Item 5 is the housing revenue account budget and rent levels 24 to 25 and housing capital investment plan 24 to 25 to 28 to 29. Councillor McGurk.
Thanks very much, Provost. First of all, members, can I thank the lead officers, Gordon McNeill, Louise Feely and John Kilpatrick and Alistair McCarthy for their help with this budget. Members, I'm pleased to present this year's budget proposals for the housing revenue account. I'm sure that everyone will acknowledge the extremely challenging situation we have been experiencing over the last year, with inflation rates continuing to put very real pressures on the cost of living and also on the operating costs for our housing services. In recent years, we have worked hard to keep rents as affordable as possible while continuing to deliver housing service and investment in our homes. And we have managed to deliver rent increases which match or slightly below inflation, seeking to minimise the impact on the pockets of our tenants. The scale of our investment plans is detailed in the paper, with some £281 million of planned investment over the next 5 years. Our investment plans include the ambitious and large-scale housing regeneration programme, which will deliver improvements across 8 housing areas, as well as ongoing work to deliver improvements to energy efficiency, investment in our multi-storey flat blocks and kitchen and bathroom replacements to some of our homes. When we consulted with the tenants on their priorities for investment, they told us clearly that the investment in energy efficiency and improving their homes was very important to them. Over 1,400 tenants engaged in our consultation process this year, and we have listened to what our tenants have told us. Over 1,200 homes will benefit from improvements in the coming year, with £41 million of investment planned during the course of 2024 to 2025. Members will also note that our plans include new build homes for the Howard Road area in Johnston, Gallow Hill, Foxbar and Fergusley Broomlands. These proposals build on the successful developments of recent years, which have seen over 320 new council homes in Bishopton, Johnston and Fergusley Park in Paisley. As convener, I'm extremely proud of the work we have been doing to provide new homes that are modern, energy efficient and spacious, which have strengthened communities and created welcoming places to live. And I am pleased to announce that we have just this week agreed levels of grant funding from the Scottish Government for both the Gallow Hill and Howard Road new build projects. It would be remiss not to mention some of the challenges we have faced through the year. The pandemic recovery period, Brexit and the war in Ukraine continue to have an impact, and the construction sector in particular continues to face a range of issues, including labour and construction cost inflation, as well as skilled labour shortages. This has led to some delays in repair and investment works, particularly in void properties, and this is a priority area for improvement in the coming year. This year has also marked by the ongoing migration and asylum provision in Renfrewshire, supporting people who have come to live and settle in the area through different humanitarian programmes. Our housing and homeless teams have been at the centre of the Council's response, and I'm extremely proud of the work of the teams across the Council who have supported this effort. We are acutely aware of the pressure on the housing system from local people in housing need, those who are homeless, as well as the pressures for those escaping conflict in their home countries. In this context, our investment in new council homes and working with our housing association partners in delivery of the Strategic Housing Investment Plan continues to be very important. As I mentioned in my introductory comments, this has been a year full of challenges and pressure on the housing revenue account. Tenants and social landlords are facing some of the most challenging economic times in recent memory. As the paper outlines, to deliver a balanced budget, we are required to set a rate increase of 6% this year. To facilitate this level of rent increase and avoid it being a higher increase, a recurring saving of £500,000 requires to be identified during this year from service reviews. Settling on a rent increase this year has been a difficult decision for the administration, as we are very conscious of the difficult financial circumstances that face many of our tenants in the context of the cost of living crisis. However, we know that for 75% of our tenants, the impact of the rent increase will be absorbed by housing benefit. This leaves another 25% of tenants who will be impacted by the rent increase. The Tenant Support Fund, which was put in place last year to provide financial assistance to those tenants who are facing hardship as a consequence of the rent increase, will be continued for this year too. Additional advice workers were also put in place last year to work with housing teams to provide proactive support to tenants who are struggling to pay their rent, and this vital support will continue this year. Members, I believe that the recommendations in the report are sound. They will help maintain the financial health of the housing revenue account, keep average rent increases at £5.45 per week, provide a mechanism to support tenants who are struggling to pay their rent as a result of the cost of living crisis. And importantly, we'll keep our ambitious plans for investment in our housing stock on track. I hope you will support the recommendations as set out in the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McGurk. Your seconder?
Councillor Innes, please.
Councillor Innes. Robert Innes?
I formally second and reserve my right to come in, Provost.
Thank you, Councillor Innes. Do we have any amendments? No amendments? Okay. Councillor Ian Nicolson? No, it's not to say, right, okay. Councillor Jim Patterson?
Thanks, Provost. I suppose I want to come in and thank Councillor McGurk for all the work her and her team have done in securing the funding. Specifically, I've been happy to see housing anywhere in Renfrewshire, but specifically in Gallaghill, which is something I and Councillor McEwen have been back and forward on with officers for probably 5 to 6 years on the location of this housing. I wouldn't, I mean, I don't want to be, I suppose, unkind to officers that are no longer here, but I remember being told we would never get the council housing on this site by a former officer, and I said, you want to bet? He's no longer here, and I am, and we are getting the council housing on that site. And that wasn't because me and Councillor McEwen decided it wasn't the right site for housing. That's because we went out and listened to the community who want council housing in Gallaghill, because Gallaghill is the area, if you're from there and you're brought up there, you want to remain there. That's where your support network is, that's where your roots are. But what they didn't want to do was lose some valuable green space, which is very little green space in Gallaghill, to the housing development. So I'm glad we got there in the end. I suppose the only play I make is when we do the council housing, given the location it's going to be, and it will displace an existing play park, that the people of Gallaghill don't lose a play park. It's either relocated and refurbished and included within the new housing development. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Councillor Andy Steele.
Thank you, Provost. Yes, much like Councillor Patterson, I'm direct attention to point 6.3.3 regarding the update on the Howard Road project and the verbal update that Councillor McGurk is providing, which I very strongly welcome. I think, like everybody in here, I make no bones about this, a clean, safe, dry housing is a basic human right in my view. I don't make any apology for it at all. It's a foundation stone that allows any sort of attainment to happen, and without it, it makes attainment that much harder. I've probably bored the chamber with this one before, but I'm going to go on it again. The ribbon in the original Howard Road scheme was cut by my great-grandfather when he was the Provost of Johnston. Now, this isn't just a political aspiration for me, there's a touch of the personal to it as well. I am absolutely delighted to see the report, and even more delighted with the verbal update Councillor McGurk has provided, and I am extremely happy to agree this motion report. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Councillor Colin McCulloch.
Thanks, Provost. I'll try and be brief on this. Provost, when we set our rents for council tenants last year, we spoke about this being the bleakest financial outlook for the residents of Renfrewshire for about a generation. I think we can all agree that's still the case. The ongoing cost of living crisis has been on top of what's been a devastating decade and a half of cuts and supports on which some of our tenants rely. And there have been calls for many for direct help with household budgets by freezing rents or keeping them below or at inflation, and I'm pleased that the convener hasn't succumbed to that, because bills do go up and incomes have been squeezed more than ever. And every household does need assistance with inflation, but particularly those with lowest incomes. I do welcome the Tenant Support Fund to continue working that for our council tenants whose incomes have been stretched more than ever before. We have a responsibility as a landlord, though, not just for tenants today, but tenants of tomorrow. And we need to make sure that our council properties are fit to face the future climate change, which is rapidly coming upon us. And we need to deal with this now. This cannot wait 10, 15 years. We must make sure that our council homes are well maintained and as energy efficient as possible. And we must also continue to build the new homes for the households across Renfrewshire who are homeless or living in poor quality housing, which other members have mentioned today. And we know from the consultation that our tenants largely agree with us. They've valued their priorities in repairs and maintenance and new build housing. And just to clarify, that means things like windows and doors and roofs and kitchens and bathrooms. Assistance for our disabled tenants to make sure that their homes aren't just fit for now, but for the long-term individual needs. Getting our homes as energy efficient as possible. and continuing that programme of new build housing that is going to meet the needs of a growing population to offset the ongoing challenge of homelessness across Renfrewshire that's we've talked about on the board, but will continue to develop. So we now must make sure that the housing that we provide not only remains affordable, but is safe and warm and energy efficient and adaptable for future needs. And to be honest, the only way that can be met, that challenge can be met, is making sure that the rents are being charged that match the investment that we require. So on that basis, the Labour group here accepts the proposal from Councillor McGurk and the report in the papers. Thanks, Provost.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor McCulloch. Councillor Cathy McEwen.
As you would expect, I agree with everything that Councillor Patterson has already said. I am absolutely delighted with the new build in Gallaghill, as well as other areas, and doing this despite all the challenges that we've faced, and we've done it. I absolutely welcome this report.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Andy Doig.
Thanks, Provost. I'd like to commend Councillor McGurk for a personal commitment to new council housing. As the longest serving councillor in Ward 9, I've spoken many times at full council and at various boards. But whatever government is in control, whether it be in Holyrood or in Westminster, the UK in general and Scotland as a country too, we need more council housing. We really do. So any movement forward is to be welcomed. And I know that Councillor McGurk feels very personally passionate about that. So I welcome that. A specific question I have for the Councillor McGurk is, I'd refer members to page 106 clause 5.3 of the report, which talks about the upgrade of communal areas. Can I ask a question? The communal areas in high-rise flats, I take it this will include Provost Close and Johnstown Centre, because the Provost Close was built in the early 70s. It's had various upgrades in different ways, but one of the ones that's badly needing is an upgrade of the communal areas. That would be very much received by my Johnstown Centre constituents.
Councillor Ian McMillan.
Thanks, Provost. No, I'm pretty happy to agree with the report. I think it's a fairly sensible approach. And I know as a former housing convener myself, how difficult it is to pitch the rents at the right level, and it's what people can afford and what we need for investment. So it's quite a difficult one, but I think you've got this one right. So quite happy to support it. And to paraphrase Councillor Doig, as the longest serving councillor in Ward 8, I certainly recommend. I'm certainly delighted with the housing that's coming to Howard Road. Absolutely, really pleased with that. I think if anybody goes down to Howard Road, it's a bit tired looking, and we certainly need investment in there. And with the success of the Johnson Castle new housing, and also the new houses in Spates, and if that can be replicated in Howard Road, I think we'll be doing really well. Thank you.
Thank you. And as the longest serving councillor in Ward 7.
It's good to paraphrase Councillor Doig, Provost. Everybody's at it.
I'll speak for myself, Councillor Montgomery, Councillor Hannigan and Councillor Barnes. We are delighted with the investment in Foxbar. Thank you. Okay, so yeah, that's us, isn't it? No votes. We all agree the housing revenue account budget and rent levels.
All right.
Okay, now I'm going to take item 9. Councillor Doig? Of course. Okay, we'll take a comfort break. We'll be back here at 5:05, and I'm going to take the motion. I'm going to take motion 1 when we come back, before we go into the Accounts Commission section report. Okay?
I'm really sorry about that. I know he said to me, ask him for that, and I thought you meant the laptop. And I went, I'm not going to take